Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video, we are continuing the series where I talk about and preview the upcoming season for every single NBA team. In today's video, we are talking about my personal favorite team, the Milwaukee Bucks. Thank you to Trent Persinger, who requested that I make a video previewing the upcoming season for the Bucks. Before I get too far into it, though, I want to remind you all to leave a like and subscribe. I've been appreciating all of the support that I've been receiving lately, and I hope to see that continue. Without further ado, let's talk about the Bucks. Like I said, this is my favorite team, so just a little warning. Might be a teensy bit of bias, but I really don't think I'm going to be too far in favor of the Bucks, but maybe a little. But before we can really preview this upcoming season, I want to take a step back and reflect upon this past offseason for the Bucks. It started with them making what, in my opinion, was the single move that will have the highest impact on who wins the championship for this upcoming season. The Bucks swapped Eric Bledsoe, George Hill, the 24th pick, 2 future first-round picks, and 2 future pick swaps in exchange for Jrue Holiday. They took a position of need, and they brought in a significant upgrade that fits their system, is going to be a terrific player. Immediately will be either the second or third best player, depending on who you view as better, Jrue Holiday versus Chris Middleton. I think this was a great trade for the Bucks. Like I said, I don't really mind them giving up the picks because we are clearly in win now mode. If we don't win a championship this season, or at the very least convince Giannis to re-sign long term, then we might as well just be terrible for 10 years because this is our chance. We had to throw our hat in the ring, and I think that we certainly did it. Yeah, it would have been great had the Bogdanovich trade gone through, but in this case, I think that we hang on to some better depth, and Dante Di Vincenzo is a player that I really like. As I'm sure you know if you've been watching this channel for a while now, he's probably one of my 3 favorite players in the NBA. I'll have to make a video about that at some point, ranking like my top 10 favorite players. But back to the Bucks. I loved this Jrue Holiday trade. Had the Bogdanovich gone through, I really think it would have put them over the top and made them the title favorite. At this point, I think they're in the same tier as a team like the Lakers. But overall, this was a huge help for them. They also got the 60th pick, which they used on Sam Merrill. Loved that pick. Little more on that a bit later. They also traded 2 second-round picks in exchange for the 45th pick, which they would use on Jordan Nora. It was necessary for them to acquire both the 60th pick and the 45th pick because they wanted to fill out their roster with as cheap of players as possible so that they could spend their full mid-level exception, or not even the... Well, I guess they did end up using the full mid-level after they signed Sam Merrill using a portion of that mid-level, but most of the mid-level exception was used on DJ Augustine, who, as I'll talk about later, is going to be a very strong backup point guard for this team. In the draft, like I said, drafted Jordan Nora and Sam Merrill with the 45th and 60th picks. In free agency, they re-signed Pat Connaughton to a 3-year, $16 million deal. They signed DJ Augustine to a 3-year, $21 million deal. They signed Bobby Portis to the biannual exception, which is $3.6 million for the first year and a player option for the second. They signed Bryn Forbes to a 2-year minimum, Tori Craig to a 1-year minimum, and Nick Stouskis to what I believe to be a non-guaranteed contract. Maybe even it's just a training camp invite. I've also heard that that contract is guaranteed, but I don't think it is because it would take the Bucks over the hard cap. So I've definitely had some differing information from different sources, but based off of my prior knowledge, I think that that's probably either a non-guaranteed or just a training camp invite. So now that we have gone over this past offseason for the Bucks, I think that we are ready to preview the upcoming 2020-2021 season. At the point guard position, which is where we always start as we go over every player, and I outline my expectations for said player in the upcoming season, it starts with Jrue Holiday for the Bucks. This is a guy they brought in via trade. They gave up a lot to get him, especially in draft capital, but I think that he's going to be a big boost to this team. On the defensive end of the floor, he brings fantastic defense at the point of attack. He can play the same level and bring the same kind of intensity that Eric Bledsoe has brought to this team the past 2 seasons. But on the offensive end, he is far better than Bledsoe. He can space the floor and shoot it at a league average level. He's not an above average three-point shooter, which would probably be the optimal guy to put alongside Giannis Antetokounmpo in the starting lineup. But he can hit a three-point shot at a reliable rate. I think that there's a good chance that we see his efficiency improve now that he'll have wide-open shots that guys like Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton create. So I think that this was a perfect acquisition for the Bucks. He's going to bring excellent defense at the point of attack. On the offensive end, he'll be able to create some secondary playmaking and ball handling when Giannis is either out of the game or even just working off of the ball alongside Giannis. All of that is super important, and I think that's what makes this Bucks team continue to be a legit championship contender instead of being maybe a bit of the pretender that they were last year. Backup point guard is DJ Augustine. Augustine is similar to so many guys I've talked about in the last couple days, your run-of-the-mill backup point guard. He handles the playmaking duties very well, takes care of the ball, has a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio for his career. Augustine also is okay on the defensive end. He's pretty small, and that allows him to be taken advantage of by some of the stronger, bigger point guards in the NBA and even perimeter players in general, because usually you're trying to hide a guy like DJ Augustine on the weakest offensive player on the opposing side. But he's smart, he does a good job in rotations, plays good team defense, and that's where his value is on the defensive end of the floor. Really, though, he's a good leader. He made the Orlando Magic much better when he was on the floor. They were a pretty bad team with him off of it, and he was really the only semblance of a competent ball handler and floor general that team had last year. So he'll be able to bring that to the Bucks' second team. They gave up George Hill in addition to Eric Bledsoe in the Jrue Holiday trade, but in adding DJ Augustine, they replaced George Hill. Maybe not completely, because Hill is capable of doing more things on the defensive end and is a better shooter, but they replaced him to the best of their ability considering the assets that they had. So I was a fan of this DJ Augustine signing. I was vouching for a lot of different teams to sign DJ Augustine. I think he would have been a good option for a lot of teams to bring in. I would have much rather seen the Celtics sign Augustine with their mid-level exception instead of Tristan Thompson, and sign a veteran big man to the minimum instead of Jeff Teague. But I digress. I like this signing for the Bucks, and we can move on to the third point guard on this roster, which is Sam Merrill. Before I talk about Sam Merrill, though, I am going to go a little out of order. I want to talk about Jordan Nora, the other Bucks rookie. I get it, he's a wing. I always do this in order. I talk about point guards, I talk about wings, I talk about big men. But in today's video, we're going to skip around a little bit. We're going to talk about a wing first in Jordan Nora, and then we'll touch on the last point guard on this roster in Sam Merrill. When the Bucks made their pick at 45, there was one player I was praying for it to be, and that player was not Jordan Nora. I had Nora ranked 42nd on my board, so I do think that taking him at 45 was certainly a reasonable proposition for the Bucks. And when they drafted him, I wasn't mad. I just wasn't as elated as I would have been had they drafted a different guy who I will get into a bit later. But I did think that, okay, this guy has a chance to maybe crack the rotation as an elite floor spacer for a rookie. On defense, he hasn't shown much, and he's not able to do much as a shot creator, but due to his sheer ability as a floor spacer, he should be able to play at least some regular season minutes off the bench. But really, I didn't come around to liking that draft choice until after the draft. And the reason why is because with the 60th pick, the Bucks somehow were able to grab the guy that I really wanted at 45, and that's Sam Merrill out of Boise State. I was praying for the Bucks to draft Merrill at 45. I had a first-round grade on Sam Merrill. I had him 29th on my big board. I was a huge fan of Merrill coming out of Utah State. I watched a multitude of his games live this past season, including the San Diego State game where he hit the buzzer beater game winner 3 in Malachi Flynn's face to win the Mountain West Championship and send Utah State to an NCAA tournament. And I think that had that tournament happened, there was a good chance that Merrill would have led that team to at least one tournament win and perhaps even a Sweet 16 appearance. But I love this pick for the Bucks. I think that he should have gone far higher than he did, and the fact that my team got the steal of the draft with the 60th pick, Mr. Irrelevant, this guy is the next Isaiah Thomas. He's going to be a difference maker at the NBA level, and I'm a big fan of this move from the Bucks. Great pick. And because they were able to get Sam Merrill at 60, I like the Jordan Nora pick quite a bit more now. I think that he's the perfect guy to complement Giannis Antetokounmpo as a floor spacer who is a knockdown three-point shooter. So overall, I think that the Bucks were a huge winner of the draft. They got 2 above-average shooters who can shoot it off of motions like dribble handoffs, like pin downs. They're not just guys that are spot up and shoot, catch and shoot out of spot ups. They don't just do that stuff. They do more complicated shots off of movement, off of dribble. Like I said before, that dribble handoff is invaluable, and I think that's going to allow Sam Merrill to function as a similar player to Duncan Robinson. Now, he's not quite the same size as Duncan is, but he's got a similar level of athleticism, and I know that's still poor athleticism, but he has the same defensive smarts that allow Duncan to be all right on that end of the floor, at least serviceable on the defensive end of the floor. And Sam Merrill is going to at least be okay on that end, and due to his shooting ability, he's going to be a very strong player on the offensive end of the floor. So I believe that this guy will be a great bench scorer at some point in his NBA career, and I'm so happy that he is one of the newest members of the Milwaukee Bucks. I just spent way too much time talking about Sam Merrill, so we can move on to some more important players on this roster as we talk about the wing position. Chris Middleton is the first wing on this team, clearly the best wing. I think the Bucks clearly have a great point guard, a great wing, and a great big man in Jrue Holiday, Chris Middleton, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. So at each position, it's pretty clear who we're going to start with. And since this is the wing position that we are currently on, we'll go into Chris Middleton. Middleton is an elite wing defender when that's what he has to focus on. Last year, however, Wesley Matthews was a Buck, and we saw him take on a lot more of the challenging perimeter player matchups, and that allowed Chris Middleton to take a huge step forward on the offensive end. His efficiency improved, his shot volume improved, and we saw him take a step from being a borderline all-star to a legit all-star who, in my opinion, was deserving of making an all-NBA team over Jason Tatum or Pascal Siakam. But to avoid ruffling too many feathers, I won't get too far into that. But come on, Chris deserved it. Come on, NBA. Middleton is terrific in the mid-range game. That was where he thrived prior to Coach Mike Budenholzer coming on 2 seasons ago. In Budenholzer's first season with the Bucks, we saw him limit Chris Middleton and not allow him to take those mid-range shots he loved. He was forced to shoot only threes, and once Bud got a little more lenient and allowed Middleton to get back to his game, we saw him become lethal. It was proven in 2 games that I specifically remember the most. The 50-point outing against the Washington Wizards in the regular season, and Game 4 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Miami Heat, where Chris Middleton carried the Bucks to a victory to bring that series to a 5th game, where obviously they would lose in Giannis Antetokounmpo's absence. But overall, I think Middleton's a terrific player. I don't think that he will make an all-star team, which might sound a bit counterintuitive considering all the great things I've been saying about him. Clearly, I view him as an all-star level player. But I think that with the loss of Wesley Matthews, Chris Middleton is going to be counted on to take on a lot more challenging matchups on the defensive end of the floor, and that's going to limit his offensive production. His numbers are going to go down, and unfortunately, basic statistics such as points per game and shooting efficiencies are really prioritized during the All-Star selection process. I think that the second All-Star for the Bucks is far more likely to be Jrue Holiday than it is to be Chris Middleton, purely because of Middleton's newfound need on the defensive end of the floor. But I do think that he's a terrific player, and yeah, I've said my piece on Chris Middleton. We'll move on to the next wing player, which is Dante Di Vincenzo. Like I said before, I'm a huge believer in Dante. On the defensive end, he's outstanding. Super smart player, always makes the right rotations, and has a very underrated skill in that he's terrific at blocking guards' jump shots from behind. He does it at a high level. Eric Bledsoe did it at a high level too, and he's certainly passed that skill onto Dante, and that allows Dante Di Vincenzo to take a lot more risks in going over screens because of his ability to recover and utilize his length to contest shots from behind. On the offensive end of the floor, that's where Di Vincenzo needs to improve. He's not much of a playmaker at this point, so he can't play the one, even if he was considered a bit more of a combo guard coming out of college. He's really only been able to play the two thus far in his NBA career. His three-point shooting also needs to improve. He only shot at 33% last season, but that was far up from 26% in his rookie year. I think that there's a chance that we see him take another huge jump in his three-point shooting due to his reputation as a great character kid and a super hard worker. I also think that that is going to come into play on the playmaking aspect. He's going to improve there, and I have told many of my close friends and family that I believe that Dante Di Vincenzo will be an NBA All-Star at some point in his career. So clearly, I'm a big fan of this guy. I'm much higher on him than most are, and maybe that's the biased Bucks fan in me shining through, but I can just be a fan of the guy. Moving on, the next guy I want to talk about is Pat Connaughton. Connaughton has gotten a reputation as like a 3-and-D wing type, but that's really not who he is. He's a super high flyer on the offensive end of the floor, elite finisher, shoots greater than 70% at the rim, but on offense, that's really where his value is primarily derived from. He's terrific in transition. That explosiveness and elite finishing ability allows for him to be a top-notch transition player in the NBA. However, outside of transition, in the half-court offense, that's where Pat Connaughton's value steeply decreases. He's not much of a three-point shooter, only shoots it at about 33%, and at times has very questionable shot decisions as we see him taking shots off the dribble where you just really wish he would pass on that. And unfortunately, that poor decision making also carries over to the defensive end of the floor where we see him have brain farts where he makes huge miscues that allows opposing players to either get open looks or easy passes over to teammates. So if we can see his decision-making improve on both ends, I think that's where Pat Connaughton can really improve and become the elite role player that is probably his ceiling at this point in the NBA. But due to the freakish offensive ability as well, or freakish athleticism and freakish transition offensive ability, holy cow, sorry about that, as well as his ability to create plays for his teammates on the defensive end of the floor by creating steals and blocks using that athleticism that I talked about before. That makes Pat Connaughton a guy who at least can get a good amount of regular season minutes. I'm not sure I trust him in the postseason. At this point, I'd probably prefer to see the next guy I'm going to talk about, Tori Craig, on the court than Pat Connaughton getting minutes in the postseason, but at least in the regular season, he's a reliable wing player who uses his athleticism to do some good things on the court. Tory Craig, like I said, is the next guy I'm going to talk about. Craig with the Nuggets was a top-notch defender. He did a great job guarding big wings, drew lots of matchups on guys like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, LeBron James. even Donovan Mitchell throughout the playoffs. Now, he didn't always do a great job on those players, but he always played very hard and gave it his all, left it all out there on the defensive side of the floor. Now, that is important, but the advanced statistics don't love his defensive impact as much as the eye test does, and usually I lean toward the advanced statistics, but in this case, I do think that bringing on someone that can give you those minutes off of the bench and do a pretty good job guarding big wing players is super valuable. Tori Craig has a chance to really step in and be that Wesley Matthews replacement on a minimum contract. I get that Craig is probably a worse three-point shooter than Matthews is, but the difference there isn't huge. Matthews is really overrated in his three-point shot. I think he only shot it about 34% last season. Tory Craig is a 32% shooter, both for his career and last season alone, I believe. That is not quite league average, but we always see players when they come into Coach Mike Budenholzer's system and when they're playing alongside Giannis Antetokounmpo, see a spike in their three-point efficiency, and I think that there's a good chance we see the same with Tory Craig. So for that reason, I think that he is a reliable option for this Bucks team in the playoffs, and I'm excited to see him in the cream and green colors that the Bucks are rocking currently. Moving on to the next wing, and that would be Bryn Forbes. Came over from the San Antonio Spurs, is an elite level three-point shooter, shot it well over 38% last season, I believe 38.8% from the three-point line. He's going to do a great job spacing the floor, and then on a team with a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo that generates so many three-point looks for his teammates, that's super valuable. We saw players last season like Sterling Brown, like Pat Connaughton, like Dante Di Vincenzo, that had earned themselves reputations as three-point shooters purely off of playing alongside Giannis. Well, Bryn Forbes has established a reputation as a top-notch three-point shooter because he was playing alongside DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. So this guy is clearly a great shooter, and I think that we could see his efficiency skyrocket, similar to what we saw from George Hill. I think that he could become like a 43+% three-point shooter in this Bucks system. The question is, what else does he do? He's not very good defensively. He's very small, but he's strong enough to guard and not be fully taken advantage of when he's switched off onto big men and they try to take advantage of him. But overall, he really just can't make much of a difference on that end of the floor. And on offense, he has no playmaking value and he can't create much of a shot for himself either. So I don't see him as a playoff rotation guy for the Bucks just because he doesn't do much besides shoot it. Finally, on the wing, we'll round out with Nick Stouskis and Thanasis Antetokounmpo. Thanasis is Giannis' brother, and that's why he's on the team. Moving on. No, I'm kidding. Thanasis is an explosive athlete, a pretty solid defensive player, and if he could shoot the ball, maybe he could crack an NBA rotation. But on offense, he doesn't have much value outside of transition. So for that reason, he's mostly just on the team because he's Giannis' brother. I'll keep it a buck with you and admit that fact. Nick Stouskis is one of the bigger busts in recent NBA history. Went 8th to the Kings in what I believe was the 2015 NBA draft. Clearly should not have gone that high, but he has shown that he can shoot the three ball at a high level. Similar to Bryn Forbes, he just doesn't do much else. But unlike Forbes, he's a complete liability on defense, doesn't work very hard, and overall just isn't very good. This is really just a training camp deal for the Bucks, I believe, so not too big of a risk here. I'm not going to say too much else. I haven't seen this guy play in years. He was out of the NBA last year. I don't know how much of Nick Stouskis we're actually going to see. Moving on to the big man position, where it all starts with the Greek Freak, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Do I need to talk about Giannis that much? Best finisher in the NBA. Great in transition, terrific dunker, explosive athlete, great finishing at the rim, which I've repeated like 4 times now, but You get the picture. He shot the highest percentage among all NBA players at the basket, with maybe the exception of Zion Williamson, but Zion only played like 20 games. That doesn't count. He's also an elite rim protector. He doesn't necessarily block the most shots, but that's mostly just because he's also relied upon to play a role as the I guess like swing type defender in the drop coverage scheme. It's his job to both play as a help defender, recover, and sometimes he's even asked to take on those difficult matchups and guard the best player on the other team. He's also a great rebounder. He's a pretty good playmaker for someone his size. You know, I had enough said about Giannis. We all know about him. Let's talk about some more unsung players. And the next guy we're talking about is definitely an unsung guy. Nobody even knows about him. Do you know why? Because his job is twirling towels on the bench. It's DJ Wilson. Yeah, he doesn't do much. But he does have some potential in the NBA. He's a good athlete for his size, and that allows him to be a versatile defensive player who can guard multiple positions down on the court. And really, he can guard on the perimeter at a high level for a big man. He also uses that athleticism to be a solid rim protector. So on the defensive end, he's a good big man. On the offensive end, he has no value. He doesn't do anything. He really can't shoot it. He's not a great finisher. He doesn't have good hands, so he ends up dropping a lot of passes. There's not too much to like about DJ Wilson on the offensive end at this point, but if he can improve that three-point shot, there's a chance that he could be a stretch four who is switchable defensively, and that is definitely a rotation guy in the NBA. We've seen players such as Robert Covington become super valuable in that type of role. I'm not suggesting DJ Wilson could reach that level, but that's the kind of player mold that we'd like to see him fit into. I'm not sure if he'll ever reach that level, reach anywhere near that level, but certainly there is still some of the tantalizing potential that the Bucks saw in him when they took him in the lottery out of Michigan. Brook Lopez is the next big man that I'm going to talk about. He's a 3-and-D big man. Knocks down the three-point shot at a high level offensively. We also saw him expand on his offensive game and play a bit more like Brooklyn Brook last year, where he uses his elite size to create easy shots in the post. He's got a really efficient hook shot. He's a good free throw shooter. And like I said before, really good in the pick and pop as a lethal three-point threat from the center position. On the defensive end, he's not switchable. He can't guard any position outside of the 5 due to his clearly slow feet. He can't move very well laterally because of his size. But quite honestly, I'm not even sure why you'd ever want to take him out of the paint if you were the team that is in possession of Brook Lopez. He is a top-notch 2.9 seconds in the paint, step out and get back in the paint type guy. He blocks shots at a higher rate than almost any other player in the NBA. I think he deserved making an all-defensive team last season. I think he did make it onto the all-defensive second team. And it's really crazy that he's come so far under Coach Mike Budenholzer, because when he was on the Nets and the Lakers, he struggled on the defensive end. So the fact that he's really reinvigorated his career as a 3-and-D big man has been super impressive to me. He's established himself as a top 65-ish player in the NBA. I'm a big Brook Lopez fan, and I hope to see him continue to have success in a Bucks uniform. The last guy to talk about on this roster is Bobby Portis. Now, I want to throw in a little fun anecdote that I heard listening to the Ringer NBA show. It was Chris Vernon talking to Kevin O'Connor, and they told a story about how before every game, Bobby Portis thinks it over in his head, and he pretends that every player on the other team punched his mom in the face, which I thought was hilarious. And having that kind of competitor who is just going to go out there and leave it all out on the court night in and night out really excites me. I think that he's going to fit in perfect with the culture, and hopefully we can see that bring the most out of him in terms of basketball. He's shown that he has a chance to be a really elite offensive big man off the bench if he can provide floor spacing from both the 4 and the 5, because I think he'll play both positions depending on if Giannis Antetokounmpo or Brook Lopez is on the court at any given time. He also has shown some defensive ability as a rim protector, but he's a pretty poor rebounder for a big man. However, due to that offensive skill, the Bucks taking a gamble on him for the biannual exception was a really nice move in my opinion. I thought for a second that they overpaid when I initially saw the contract, but because I thought it was like, when I saw 2 years, $7 million, I was like, they gave him $7 million for 2 years, but no, it was 2 years, $7 million total. So that's a much better deal than the alternative would have been. I'm glad that he is a Buck, and I'm excited to see what he can do in the Bucks uniform. Also, I want to give my opinion on the new uni with the 2 different shades of blue. I actually really like it. I get it, some people have not been fans, but I think the whole thing with it incorporating the Great Lakes and also bringing in some of the racial equality stuff by having the 2 different shades really just being the same, I thought that was really cool, and I thought that this is a jersey that I will be purchasing at some point in the near future. To sum up this whole video, I think that the Bucks did get better in this offseason. They lost Eric Bledsoe, but they added Jrue Holiday, which is a significant upgrade at the starting point guard position. They lost George Hill, but they added DJ Augustine, which is a very minor downgrade at the backup point guard position. On the wing, they lost players like Sterling Brown, like Wesley Matthews, but I think that they did a really nice job replacing them by bringing in Tori Craig and Bryn Forbes. At the big man spots, just knocked my glasses out my face. I think that losing Marvin Williams is a bit of a bigger blow than a lot of people are making it out to be. He was a perfect player in Bud's system as someone who can play both the 4 and the 5, but I also think that Bobby Portis is capable of coming in and replacing that production, and Portis also has a higher ceiling than Marvin Williams did, so they improved at the backup big man positions. Overall, I think this is a really good offseason for the Bucks, and spoiler alert, because I'll be making my season predictions video later. I mean, yeah, I'm a Bucks fan. I have to pick them to win the championship. I think that in an 82 game season, this would probably be a team that would get 60 to 65 wins once again. So in a 72 game season, that would probably translate to like 50 to 55 wins, somewhere in there. So I guess if I had to make a prediction for the Bucks win-loss record, I would say 53-19. They're my championship pick. I mean, I love the squad, and I really hope that we can win the chip this year. Yeah, I think I covered everything I needed to cover. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. Do you think the Bucks can win the championship this year? Please say yes, just for me. That's it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all again very soon.